and welcome to this edition of Within the Frame. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Han Da-eun. On March 27th every year, people in various parts of the globe come together to celebrate World Theater Day, a day to promote the importance of theater arts and to raise awareness about the value of theater in all its forms. Marking the meaningful occasion, we've invited two special guests tonight to talk about the latest buzz surrounding theaters as well as movies. To my left, we have Jason Bechervaise, film critic and professor at Kyungdong University. Great to have you back.
Yeah, great to be here, as always.
And to my right is Seoul, professor and filmmaker at Seoul Institute of the Arts. Welcome to the program.
Nice to be here.
We're going to have to start off with some gloomy news, Jay. Hakchon, which stood tall as an icon of the vibrant theater street in Daehangno, will shut down permanently. What are the implications to Korea's theatrical landscape?
Well, it's a landmark, basically. You know, in Daehangno, I've actually watched, I don't know the exact English translation, Subway Line 1,
Right.
you know, 지하철 1호선, which is like a really famous, kind of like a musical theater thing. And all the big actors like 설경구, you know, many actors now that are in movies and Netflix, you know, Korea stuff they started out on the stage there. So it's very sad sort of that it's closing down. But, you know, after COVID, it's affected cinema, but I think it's done really, you know, a tremendous disservice to the theatrical experience. And right now, most of Daehangno, I was there about 3 weeks ago, it's mostly musicals. So you don't have those kinds of smaller, you know, mid-sized theaters or the small theaters that you went in there. There was like always a period where you could look at a piece where the actor's literally a few feet from you.
Right.
And you really kind of immerse yourself in that world. And now nobody's going to see them. And so the sort of ticket sales have really suffered. So the manager's like sitting on top of huge debt. And so it's very sad, but you know, right now I think most people, when they think of theater, it's like musicals and big productions. And you know, sometimes those theaters also just are rented to do concerts as well for music. And right now the income is so little. And it's affecting cinema, but I'm just thinking the live experience is now at the all-time low. And I could tell you, because I'm at the Seoul Institute of the Arts, which is a theater school. It started out as theater. And you know, there I'm seeing, you know, just each department having sort of, because of our low birth rate and everything, theater as a major used to be a very hot major, but now very low turnout for student applying. If it wasn't for the fact that you could act as an actor, I think nobody would even apply. So it's a kind of a sad time.
So you are at the forefront of Korean theaters, witnessing all this. It is really quite sad because Hakchon, you know, it holds the historical and symbolic significance in Korean theaters. It really was the icon of the Daehangno street, wasn't it? It was also once the cradle to nurture various big name stars, like you mentioned, 설경구, 조승우, as well as Hwang Jung-min.
Right.
But it has been steadily losing its footing as large-scale productions assert their dominance. And we'll talk about that more in a bit. But before that, Jason, Korea's theatrical sphere, it was hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Sure.
And small theaters, lots of them have closed down due to financial strains. But what about other countries, like the US or the UK, for example? How are the Western theater productions holding up?
Yeah, no, it's a complex picture. In the United States, you know, Broadway, there is a 40% drop since kind of pre-pandemic levels in terms of the number of performances. Although they're well attended, there isn't quite the demand to keep up the number of performances on Broadway. And I think that's down to just what we're seeing in cinemas worldwide, here in Korea as well, is that there's just been a change in viewing habits. So whereas before people would go to the theatre and do it regularly, and whereas now they're doing that less so, and people are doing a lot more kind of viewing at home, of course. Yeah, I mean films, but also perhaps watching shows as well at home through streaming platforms and so on and so forth. And Broadway's had difficult times in the past. It had obviously 9/11 and then also the recession in the late 2000s, but it bounced back, and it seems to be struggling to bounce back this time. And in the UK, it's somewhat different in that they're facing actually staff shortages, and that's related to the cost in living crisis. So a lot of people in the sector, in the performing arts sector, are freelancers, and they're just not earning enough money to be able to make ends meet. So a lot of people are actually leaving the sector altogether, and so there's just not enough staff there, and there are concerns going ahead that whether they're going to have enough staff to kind of keep the sector running properly and making it profitable. The culture sector in the UK is hugely important to the UK economy. Just a few years ago, actually, it was one of the best performing sectors of the British economy, and that's down to various things that the government's done there. There's so much shooting going on, they're having to build various sound stages just to meet demand. But the problem is actually trying to get staff, which is actually a problem for various sectors of the British economy. So whereas in other markets such as Canada, it seems to be performing quite well, seeing a return to some of the levels that we saw pre-pandemic. So it is a complex picture, a mixed, nuanced picture.
So not all parts of the world, but many parts of the world are still suffering.
Yes, still suffering for different reasons as well.
Right.
So of course we've got the knock-on effects of the the COVID pandemic, but you've also got in terms of the UK. I mean the war in Ukraine had huge repercussions on inflation and energy costs,
right.
And that's forced some people out of the sector altogether.
Right now, Jay, spectators in Korea have also been returning to performing arts. Mm-hmm. Ticket sales for various performances shot up by 500% last year compared to the peak of the pandemic. But this was mainly led by big-name musicals and large K-pop concerts. It was a whole other story for small theaters. What are the causes of this polarization?
Well, before COVID, it was already starting to decline anyway, because I think, as you called, like big business, like there's a lot of money behind the companies that bring in like, a big musical from, basically Europe or America. And usually the way the musicals in Korea worked is that you brought over the original cast of the musical from that English language speaking or whatever language it was. And then they would change it with Korean sort of language. And then gradually, the people would watch everything in Korean, right? So that was the trend. But now, the smaller theaters had its own kind of niche market where people went to see it. But, as I said earlier, that was declining. I think especially we have a very low birth rate in Korea. And so the youth is just kind of like, there's so many things in the horizon, like gaming, more new technologies and things like that, that they find just going to sit in a theater for 2 hours is a huge time suck to them. And one of the things that, as you mentioned in England, when I was visiting there, what I really found, this is the country of Shakespeare, because, London as just a city, you would have these, sectors like boroughs, and some of the boroughs would have local community theaters in there. And so when I visited, I was shocked to see that it was a really famous actor acting in this like really tiny theater, doing a Shakespeare, like Othello or something, and I was shocked because, he was an actor I knew from like, something like Sherlock or something like that. So you've seen him in movies and that. And then when I went to ask the theater people, it was like the whole season's tickets were already bought in advance by the community. And on the weekends, they did children's theater. So it's in the culture. In England, it's almost like when you're born, you go to the theater. You also go see a lot of football matches, but it's part of the culture, right? So, if we had that, I think we had a certain, people, before cinema really hit its stride, I think theater, it's over 5,000 years of history, this art form, and it needs technological advances. I think that's why musicals do so well, because a lot of musicals nowadays, instead of having a set, they just plaster it with background LEDs, so you know, there's a lot of like visual stuff that's happening with the acting that's happening that's live. And it's still like really terrific to, I mean, I'm from film, but I mean, what's great about theater is like you're breathing the same air as your performer,
Right.
and then the time is the same. And when the actor looks at your face, your eyes meet.
Right in your
there's,
eyes.
Yeah, there's a connection, and yeah, it just kind of moves you in this way if you watch a really good play. And I think we need to kind of start earlier. I think students, like from the elementary school level, should go see a play. It should be in their curriculum to do that, and in middle school and high school. But everything's focused on math and science and engineering. And I think, you know, for a culture to continue like this, and we're known for the Korean wave and all this culture, and I see kind of a bleak future because things like theaters going downhill is like, you know, basically it's a cultural problem that we need to start with younger people to replenish this passion.
So culture also plays an important part in mitigating the widening gap between small and big productions. Now, shifting focus to Korean cinemas, which are slowly rebounding from a significant downturn. Jason, supernatural thriller Exuma has surpassed the 10 million audience milestone as expected.
Yes.
Becoming the first in the occult genre to achieve such feat. It's also enjoying massive popularity outside of Korea, making a big splash in countries like Vietnam and Indonesia.
Yep.
What do you think captivated the spectators in other parts of Asia?
Yeah, no, it's done really well. It sold 2 million tickets in Indonesia and $3 million on its opening weekend in Vietnam. You know, I think it's perhaps the most significant Korean film since Parasite to kind of, you know, to do so well here locally, but also sell so well internationally. And I think, you know, looking at Parasite, I think there are some interesting parallels because, you know, if you watch Exuma, it's a very Korean film. It's dealing with religion, you know, shamanism. It's dealing with some very kind of local themes, and that's, you know, been very much the case for many Korean films for many years. And, you know, Parasite, when it was released all those years, well, I say all those years ago, but back in 2019, I remember it screening at Cannes, and Bong Joon-ho was concerned that it was too Korean to actually work overseas. But the fact was, it was a film that had, I guess, universal kind of messages, but also the fact that it was Korean. That was what was so appealing about it to many viewers. And I think that's true of Exuma. It kind of blends different genres. It's kind of part horror, it's part mystery, it's part, you know, it's a lot of different things. There's a bit of melodrama in there as well, and it kind of harks back to films of the 1970s, both here in Korea and in the United States. But it's a very distinctive movie. It's fun. It's enthralling. I was very fortunate to watch the movie at the premiere here in Seoul, and I was buzzing after it. I was so excited. It was a great collective experience to watch this film that was just truly entertaining. And I think, you know, the director, he understands what audiences want, and he's got messages in there and lots of kind of Easter eggs, but at the same time, you know, audiences find it fun, and I think that's ultimately what people have enjoyed about it, you know, both here in Korea and internationally. And so, yeah, it kind of delves into some quite complex local themes, but at the same time, it ensures that it's very entertaining.
Well, for countries like Vietnam and Indonesia, they're same Asian countries, but they have very different culture and religion.
Sure.
And as you've highlighted, perhaps Exuma, the very elements that are very distinct and unique to Korea, the very cultural and religious elements shown in the movie that are very unique to Korea, I guess, is what attracted so many moviegoers in those countries. And I hear that the Exuma has been exported to over 130 countries, and so hopefully we will gain a wider spectrum of viewers across the Western countries as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was released in the UK, and I think what's happening now is that Korean films are released in other countries almost simultaneously. simultaneously. That didn't happen before in the same way. I mean, Parasite was rolled out over a year, whereas, you know, this film, it was released in Korea within a week or two. It was released in the UK. When I was there, I never got Korean films that quickly, and it was also true of 12 the Day as well. That was released in Britain, I think a week or two after its release here in Korea. So audiences overseas are getting more and more Korean films, and they're getting them quicker. And I think that helps, you know, with the marketing as well, because, you know, audiences see, oh, it's performing well, it's resonating with viewers overseas, and that's all part of, you know, promoting the film domestically.
Exciting new change. Now back to you, Jay. President Yoon, as part of his strong drive to revamp people's livelihoods, he vowed to scrap or significantly lower the administrative charges levied on services and goods, and that includes 3% additional fee levied on movie tickets. What are your thoughts on this? And would it have an impact on the movie industry? Why are you laughing?
Because I don't really feel good about it. As a filmmaker, you know, I think it's kind of a bad policy, and literally he's saying, because the election season's around, basically, you know, by taking off that tax, 3%, comes out to 501. You know, which is like, the ticket is like 15,000 won, and you're taking 500 won off that's not even going to help the customer in any sense. And also, that 3% was used for, you know, it was a film fund that basically helped, you know, promote Korean cinema, helped fund some of the, you know, independent projects. There was actually a purpose for that tax. And so a lot of filmmakers and producers are very angry at the government, and the government knows that you know, they're taking that away. So they're promising to sort of find other sources of funding, but you know, we all know when a government says they'll do that later, they probably won't do that. So you know, I just kind of feel like it's a bad. I mean, I understand you want to kind of sort of reduce taxes and really, you know, shore up and streamline your budgeting for the whole thing, but you know, the worst thing you can do is take that little bit of money away from basically filmmaking and the arts. And I just feel like every time the Korean government, you know, they like to take all the sort of the you know, responsibility and the kudos for creating Korean Wave, which actually they had nothing to do with. It's like lightning in a bottle. It's a cultural thing that exploded because Korean people are creative, you know, and there's a lot of stuff happening. But instead of promoting and giving us money to increase that sort of passion, I think the fact that they're taking our money away is just terrible.
That could be a very subjective opinion from a person in the movie industry. The government is aware about the concerns, and so the government has said that it will make sure that the movie industry gets the support, the necessary support it needs. So hopefully we can pin hopes on the government's promise. Now to you, Jason. A great deal of attention is being drawn to whether new movies like Troll Factory, when translated directly, it would be Comment Army, but the actual movie title in English I hear is Troll Factory, starring Son Seok-gu. Do you think it will carry on the momentum established by the popularity of Exuma?
I hope so. I mean, the reservation figures before it opened were quite encouraging. It hit over 100,000, which is, I think, it is an uptick compared to a few months ago. It has dropped slightly over the last couple of days, so I imagine that was probably down to the fact that there are fans out there who wanted to watch the film on its opening day. You know, Son Seok-gu is obviously hugely popular, as is many of the cast. I quite liked it, actually. I saw it yesterday, and I think it kind of goes into the world of social media and what's real and what's not and what's generated and the dangers of of basically manipulating or creating stories online. And it's much like Exuma, actually. It's a very engrossing feature. It's never boring. I think some would argue that it kind of ends somewhat abruptly, but yeah, I hope it does continue the momentum that Exuma has kind of I guess it's given the industry a boost, as did Seoul, 12/12 the Day, Seoul, otherwise known as Seoul Spring. And, you know, the impression I get is that perhaps the industry has turned a corner. 4 films so far have broken even. A total of just 6 films broke even for the whole of last year. And I think that, you know, we've got a new Ma Dong-seok film coming out, or Roundup sequel, so, you know, one would hope that that breaks even. So I think we are going to see more films, get past that point where they're not losing money, and so hopefully the industry has, it is on the way to a recovery. We have to wait and see. I mean, the last year, in terms of the number of viewers and also in terms of revenue compared to before the pandemic, 40% down in Korea, which is alarming. And in the States or in many other parts of the world, it's 20% down. So they're still recovering. But Korea is an anomaly in the sense that it's far more pronounced, the problems that we have here. And so hopefully, fingers crossed, the industry is finding its way back on its feet.
All right, now before we let you go, Jay, the action comedy blockbuster film, The Roundup Punishment, will hit theaters next month with the most formidable and vicious villain yet, according to Don Lee. The series has attracted over 6.8 million cinema goers since its first release in 2017. What do you expect from the 4th installment? We are a little pressed on time, so if you could mention just
I haven't seen it yet, but it's played at the Berlin Film Festival, and apparently the buzz is really there. Basically, Ma Dong-seok is that super cop who just busts through things, and I really love the first one, Roundup, which is really terrific. But this time, I heard it's about online gaming, and then we have Kim Myeol, as you said, he's like really buffed up to play this kind of the evil character. So, what I like about the Roundup series is that you have the cast of characters that come back, the cops, all the small criminals, and so the people really like that kind of camaraderie between sort of all the actors that are happening. And Ma Dong-seok is basically, I would say, singularly just kind of helping the Korean film industry, because all of the Roundups have done so well. But the third one was a little iffy, but I heard this one's gonna come back and really knock it out of the park again. So.
All right. Well, I hear it's going to be quite dusty throughout the weekend with all the yellow dust flowing into the Korean Peninsula. But so perhaps we can hit theaters to watch those new movies.
Indeed.
Or find a really good play to enjoy
Please.
In small theaters for
Yes.
a change.
Yes.
Perhaps we can all do that. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, Jay and Jason.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back with more same time next week. Have a great weekend.